Well, hello everybody and welcome. A few technical issues. Good evening and welcome aboard the wreck of the Ruby Princess. I'm your cruise director, Tori. Pour yourself an adult beverage. I'm having a mineral water with ice in a wine glass, pretending I'm having a wine or something. We've got a lot to cover in tonight's episode, episode 4. Can't believe it's only been 4 days, and the amount of information I'm going to be going through tonight is pretty full on. More than happy for anyone to jump up on panel if they want to chat about the Ruby Princess saga. You're also more than welcome to catch up in chat and talk about what's going on, but I won't be reading chat a lot of the time because I've got a lot of screens I want to share and a lot of information to get through. But yes, this is an ongoing saga and will be ongoing for a long time. They're currently saying the police investigation, which they thought would take 2 months, is blown out to about 4. And then on top of that, there's also a special commission of inquiry that could take about 6 months. So this is going to be an ongoing series looking into what's going on. And I don't even know at this stage if we're even going to ever find out the truth of it, because there's so many parties involved, so many parties downplaying it, other parties pointing the finger. It's a schmozzle. It's a schmozzle. But I hope you're all doing well in self-isolation. And if you're interested in the Ruby Princess, I hope you enjoy this series, which will be interactive. Like I said, more than happy for people to jump up on panel if they've read something or they want to talk about something. I try to keep these episodes, the live episodes, to about an hour and go through all the latest sort of headlines and news. And g'day from upstate New York, USA. Wow, about 2 to 3 hours from New York City. Thanks, Denise. I love taking everyone on walking tours. Didn't do that today, though. It was a bit bloody cold. But I hope you're doing okay. You're 2 or 3 hours from New York City, but my heart's breaking for New York City every time I see the latest stories coming out of there. Absolutely terrible, devastating, such a great city. My favourite city in the world that I've travelled to, I have to say. So, yeah, we're thinking of you. And this morning I did record a very short episode 3, because we had breaking news that the first international passenger from the Ruby Princess sadly passed away, a 76-year-old Californian man by the name of Stephen Lazarus. I do want to try to acknowledge the victims as and when names are confirmed, but so far there are only 4 confirmed names, but there are now 20 people who have sadly died after being on the Ruby Princess. Interestingly, though, the breaking story this afternoon is that Australia's youngest COVID-19 fatality is a man in his 40s who was a crew member on another cruise ship, the Artania. And there are 6 cruise ships now that have attributed to deaths from COVID-19 in Australia. There's the Ruby Princess, which is by far the worst, 20 victims. There's Ovation of the Seas, the Diamond Princess. Our first Australian COVID-19 fatality was unfortunately one of the passengers on the Diamond Princess. That's a cruise ship that was in Japan, if you remember that one. The Celebrity Solstice, the Artania, and Voyager of the Seas. So cruise ships are not great, but I've never thought they were. And I don't feel vindicated in feeling that way with what's happening now, but yeah, not great at all. So just a little bit of information about the youngest Australian COVID-19 victim. This story broke 3 hours ago. Pardon me. He was a crew member on the Artania cruise ship. He died in Perth. He was 42 years of age, a national of the Philippines, and sadly he died on Thursday at the Royal Perth Hospital. WA Health Minister Roger Cook announced the death today, and he said his family have been notified and were put in contact with that crew member via translators and the shipping company, and they were able to reach out to him in his dying days, he said. Very, very sad. The Artania is currently docked in Fremantle in Western Australia. It is expected to leave on Saturday, tomorrow. So although that's not a death related to the Ruby Princess, we did do a short episode this morning on the podcast, which obviously came across to the YouTube channel as well, about the first international fatality, the 76-year-old man from California, Stephen Lazarus. So currently we've now got 20 COVID-19 victims from the Ruby Princess, 19 Australians and 1 man from the US. So that's sad news. And I don't think that's going to be the end of it either, unfortunately. You don't need to come up, Will, if you're sneezing. You can just sit there and listen. I think you were mentioning earlier in chat that you've taken some meds too. So, we don't want you to be falling asleep or anything like that. And like I said, I've got a fair bit to go through. I will jump over and check chat and see how everyone's doing. If you've got any questions, I'm going to put together a chronology. Pardon me, I don't know why I'm suddenly coughing. I've got beautiful flowers behind me. I hope it's not them. One of my beautiful neighbour dropped those flowers out of her garden down to me yesterday and handed them to me from a distance, put them down near my door. So that's sad news coming off the Artania, and of course the first international death from COVID-19 as well, and directly connected to the Ruby Princess. So you can have a listen to the little podcast episode I uploaded this morning if you haven't already. That goes into a little bit more detail about that. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is, hang on, I'm just going to have a swig of my drink. Try and clear my throat. I don't know what's happened. So another thing that broke today is that passengers from the Ruby Princess, and they're saying thousands. Now, I've found one story that said 5,500. I found another story that said 7,000. I don't know what the accurate figure is, but I'm finding with all of the stuff connected with the Ruby Princess, the figures are out of whack. Some reports are saying there are 600 confirmed cases now. Others are saying there's over 700. But in any event, anyone that was on the Ruby Princess cruise, the fatal one that disembarked passengers in Sydney on the 19th of March, plus the cruise of the went before that one, so the cruise prior to the COVID-19 one, for argument's sake, they're all going to be sent questionnaires, because there's still a lot of debate about whether or not the COVID-19, the coronavirus, was already on the ship from the previous cruise or not, despite the cleaning. I am trying to find out what the turnaround is with cruise ships, how long it takes to clean them, but it is pretty quick from what I can gather. But there's 12 questions on this questionnaire that's been sent out by New South Wales Police, and all passengers will be sent it electronically. It's asking them questions such as where they dined on the ship, if they received medical advice about coronavirus on board, if they travelled to any ports off the ship. The questions also probe whether there were onboard announcements about coronavirus, and also asked people to hand over any photos or videos that they took on the cruise. New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott said the survey will be sent to all passengers who travelled on the cruise's last 2 voyages. There you go, there's the wording I was looking for. Unfortunately, 20 passengers have died since the ship docked in Sydney last month, and also hundreds of positive COVID-19 cases around Australia have been linked back to the Ruby Princess. And also, I believe there are some international passengers that have also tested positive. About 900 of the 2,700 passengers on that second trip were from overseas. Now, I'm going to share the screen because I've got the Strike Force BAST Ruby Princess passenger questionnaire that we can have a little look at. Unfortunately, it does say the full form can be seen below. However, Questions 11 and 12 are not on this screenshot. I emailed the article to myself to see if I could get the full version. I've tried to download it. I've Googled it. And so far, I haven't actually been able to find a complete strike force BAST Ruby Princess passenger questionnaire. But let's have a look at some of the questions that they are being asked. Share my screen. Just by way of explanation too, I'm fascinated. Notice to see if I've got the right screen. Yep, here we go. I'm going to expand it a little bit as well. I'm interested in this entire sort of case, the investigation and the Special Commission of Inquiry, because in recent weeks, just chatting with friends about what's been going on, it's rare to have a conversation where this isn't brought up. And I'm fascinated that there's the criminal investigation underway. Now there's also the Special Commission of Inquiry, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. I still have some research to do about how Special Commissions of Inquiry actually work. And I know that the police investigation, they're saying the outcome of that may never actually be disclosed to the public, but I want to find out why they can withhold that outcome, or if there are special circumstances where it should be released, if it's deemed to be, of public knowledge and relevance for us all to know. I certainly think the families are entitled to know. So let's have a look at this little questionnaire that they're all going to be getting. I'll expand it a bit. Love my touchscreen laptop. So hopefully that's coming up fairly well on your screens, but even if it's not, I'm just going to read all the questions out. Curious to know with people in chat if this is a story you're following as well. If you are fascinated by it. I mean, there are so many major players involved in this: the state government, the federal government, the port authorities, even the Department of Agriculture's involved. You've got the cruise line itself, obviously, being heavily scrutinised at the moment. You've got people like the New South Wales Emergency Services Minister, David Elliott, saying it was a monumental stuff-up. You've got the New South Wales Premier, Gladys Berejiklian. She's also admitted it was a bit of a fuck-up. I mean, they weren't her words. Don't quote me on that one. Her words were that the matter had been mishandled. So, you've got Border Force involved. It's pretty full on. And also you've got a very high-profile special counsel who's overseeing the Commission of Inquiry, and Brett Walker, special counsel, is probably best known for being Cardinal George Pell's lawyer. So, it's going to be interesting, and there's going to be all kinds of politics. There's going to be, I think, a lot of stuff that's just not going to come out, unfortunately, but who knows? We shall follow it with interest. Cherie's interested in the outcome of the investigation, and a lot of buck passing. Yeah, the buck passing's fantastic from a spectator point of view. Not great for the families of the victims, but there's the buck's being passed and pointed at all sorts of people. You've even got the opposition in New South Wales saying it's Scott Morrison's fault. Like, I need to do like a chart with little arrows pointing at who's blaming who. But let's have a look at this questionnaire and we'll just run through the questions. The first one is, were you travelling with any family or friends? If so, what were their names and cabin numbers? The second question, did you or anyone you were travelling with contract COVID-19? And if so, what were their names? It's a bit grim. I think they could have used what are their names, but anyway. Question number 3, did you or anyone you were travelling with receive any medical treatment whilst on the cruise, including from the cruise's medical centre? And then in brackets, if so, what were their names, medical condition and treatment received? 4, was there any information passed on or announcements made about ways to avoid contracting any illness such as COVID-19? 5, did you see or are you aware of extra cleaning taking place on the ship during the cruise? And then in brackets, please describe what happened and where. 6, did you see or are you aware of any passengers or crew being separated or quarantined during the cruise? In brackets, please describe and identify persons if possible. Question 7, what ports did you travel to? In brackets, what locations and how long did you stay at the location? Question 8, did you book any offshore tours at those ports? And this is where it sucks. I've got question 9 and 10, but 11 and 12, no idea. But I've made a note to try and find the full 12 questions, despite this article clearly saying the full form can be seen below. Nah. Whoever was responsible for this screenshot didn't do a very good job. Or, even where the little banner is with the Twitter, Facebook, and email icons, they're only really covering the boxes for 9 and 10. But anyway, question 9, where did you commonly go whilst on the ship? Describe those areas, brackets, e.g. restaurants, bars, pools, attend any shows or theme nights. How embarrassing if you're like, yes, my husband and I went to the theme night, the animal farm theme night. I went as a donkey and my husband went as a pig. Sorry, I'm trying to find some humour in this. Question 10, did you have a set dining time table each night? Brackets, if so, who did you dine with and what was your table number? So, yeah, there's 2 questions missing, but, I mean, it would be likely that they would be, along the same vein as all of these other questions, you would think. But hopefully we'll be able to get a copy of the full questionnaire at some point. If anyone does come across things and you'd like me to cover it in this series, you can email me at smoothcriminalchannel, all one word, at gmail.com. It's probably the easiest way to get in touch. If you're already a friend of mine on Facebook, you can clearly send me links and things like that in Messenger. I'll check that as well. But for those of you that would prefer to use email, it's smoothcriminalchannel at gmail.com. So that's that. That's a questionnaire. Any opinions about that one? Let's have a look. I do feel like they could have been a little more specific with the questions. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, they're just trying to get as much info as possible, and then presumably from that, the answers, then they'll be contacting some people. I mean, there'd have to be some people that'll be sending in their questionnaires that, can't remember a bloody thing because they were drunk the whole time, possibly. But that is the questionnaire that is apparently going out to between 5,500 and 7,000 people, depending on which article you're reading. This particular article says thousands. It doesn't actually specify, but I have seen other articles where it's talked about 5,500, and I've also seen ones where it said 7,000. We've already covered the latest death, which was announced today. The 76-year-old man in California, Stephen Lazarus. He died from coronavirus complications earlier this month after traveling on the Ruby Princess with his wife, Alyssa. Now, she also tested positive for COVID-19 but didn't have any symptoms. According to the ABC, which is an Australian TV and radio network, not the American ABC, they've traced at least 35 COVID-19 cases among the ship's 900 international passengers. But everyone's concerned those figures could be higher. And, that makes perfect sense because they all got disembarked in Sydney. And this is just the 35 international ones the ABC have traced, but they know that, 2,700 passengers were pretty much disembarked from the ship on the 19th of March in Sydney. a lot of them had to travel home to their, whatever Australian state they live in, and then others had to travel back to the countries they live in. So, yeah, the true figure is never really going to be known. In terms of Australian victims, so far we've had victims, unfortunately, in New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania, South Australia, the ACT, and that's it. No one from the Northern Territory or Victoria, interestingly. I'm just having a look at the moment. I'm on the ABC News website to see, pardon me, if there's more information, and there is. There's a Canadian passenger, Eva Pallai, and her boyfriend. They're among at least 6 Canadians that have tested positive, and she's still angry. She told the ABC, "We were left in the dark. Nobody told us there were cases on board. We were left roaming several airports and possibly contaminating others." So they've got the 6 confirmed positive tests in Canada. There's 1 in Utah, 2 in California, which would be Steve Lazarus and his wife, Alyssa, and at least 1 in the UK. And there's also a cluster of 19 cases in the Hawke's Bay region of New Zealand, also linked to the ship's stopover in Napier during the cruise. Now, I know that Shine Lawyers that are doing the class action, they've got 19 international passengers included in the class action at the moment from New Zealand, Canada, the US, and the UK. The Canadian passenger, Ms. Pallay, she fears the true number of international cases could be higher, with legal action against operator Carnival Cruises now pending in US courts. She told the ABC the ship's departure from Sydney on March the 8th was delayed by more than 7 hours due to cleaning. She asked crew members whether the cleaning was related to a previous coronavirus case on board the ship, but she was reassured everything was okay. And she straight out, point blank, asked them, "Does this have anything to do with coronavirus? Are there any cases on board?" And she said they just lovingly, with a smile, said there were no issues. So, yeah, the article then goes on to talk about the questionnaire that we just talked about. It also mentions Stephen Lazarus, who'd been on a ventilator for 2 weeks before he died on April the 9th after developing COVID-19 symptoms on his return to the States. And I might just show a little photo of Stephen Lazarus as well while I've got this article up, because I'm big on honouring the victims. I don't want any of them to feel like they're the families that their family members are just victims. So that's Stephen Lazarus on the left. He sadly lost his life, and that he's with his son Michael. And they're obviously devastated that they've lost their dad, as you would be. Just jumping back to chat. Hi, Joe. Welcome. Hi, Serenity B. Good to see you, both of you. Do we know what cruises ship did beforehand, and if there are any cases on that one? Well, at the moment, they're denying that there were any cases on the previous cruise. There is an article I'm going to bring up at some point that has the specific dates of the prior voyage. The one thing I can say is that I don't know if it was the same cruise as the second voyage, which was from Sydney to New Zealand and then back to Sydney, like a return trip. I do know the second voyage got back to Sydney ahead of time, and I also know that on the 18th of March, Princess Cruises sent an email saying that there were no cases of coronavirus on the ship. It is law for a ship to declare that the ship is free of contagions before it's allowed to dock in a port and disembark passengers. And there was an email that I have seen, but I'm still waiting to verify that. So I know that people can mock up emails and it may not be legitimate, but it did essentially say that the crew and all the guests on board were good to go. So that's of massive concern. And the exact quote from that email was, "We have a ship full of healthy guests and healthy crew. There are no coronavirus cases on board. However, there wasn't any screening of the passengers before they disembarked. And, essentially many of them took COVID-19 out and about into the community, including those 900 international patients." But another figure that I did get was that there were, in fact, 13 confirmed positive tests on March the 19th, when all passengers were allowed to disembark in Sydney. 13 people on board had already tested positive for COVID-19. And like I was saying, the police commissioner has said, by law, a vessel is only allowed to dock if the captain can assure authorities it is free from contagion. So, yeah, pretty dodgy, right? Serenity Bee, how beautiful, naming victims, not numbers. Thank you. I think it's important. I think it's important for every single person who's lost their lives to this. You see the mass graves and stuff and all the coffins being piled up, and it just breaks my heart, that it's horrible these people have to die alone. It's horrible these families aren't able to give them a proper funeral, but it's also horrible if they just become a number. That being said, there's, so far I've only got the confirmed names of 4 victims. I do know the names of the 3 Tasmanian victims linked to the Ruby Princess, but because they haven't been made public, I don't want to say their names. So I'm kind of making sure I don't read out names until they're publicly known. And I only know the names of the 3 Tasmanian victims because family members have been in Premier's press conferences letting everyone know who they are and the names of their parents that died or grandparents. So, yeah, at the moment, the only names I've got, the first victim in Australia was a 67-year-old woman from New South Wales, Janet Lieben. Carla Lake, 75. Now, she's from Caboolture in Queensland, and her husband is determined to get to the bottom of it. And I've seen him being interviewed a fair bit. And I'm going to try and reach out to all of the families, I don't want to be gory and, put them on this show to sort of, use their tragedy to boost my show. But I also want them to know that there are people all over the country and all over the world who feel for them and are as interested and as invested in this as, maybe not as invested as they are, but who care and want to know what really went wrong. And the other name I have is Des Williams, an 85-year-old from Toowoomba in Queensland. And now, sadly, this morning, the latest death that was announced is Stephen Lazarus, 76, from California in the USA. Sweet dreams, Will. Good to see you. And thanks for, hit the like button for Tori. Thanks, Will. Joanna, interesting given they showed that virus was present 17 days after a voyage. How could a captain ensure a ship was free of COVID-19? Well, this is the problem, isn't it? This is a huge problem. But again, I need to verify that email from the captain, and I also need to verify the fact that there were 13 people on board that had already tested positive for COVID-19. They're both sources I need to follow up and just see exactly what the story is there. But there's certainly 2 things that are sending alarm bells off for sure. So while we're talking about the ship, let's go to the latest update on the crew members. I've got so many different articles to run through. How are we going for time at the moment? 32 minutes in. Perfect. I think we'll nail this. So, let's talk about the crew. The ship has more than 1,000 crew on board. Again, another number that I can't get the exact amount, but I think it's around 1,100. The ship is still docked at Port Kembla, south of Sydney. It is meant to be leaving Australia on Sunday, but that hasn't been confirmed. And, at this stage, who knows? This particular article, the one I'm looking at the moment, is the ABC News article, and it was posted it was updated 6 hours ago. And it says that 128 crew members have tested positive for COVID-19. The announcement from Carnival Australia, the operator of the Ruby Princess, said it was cooperating with police. Carnival's an American-owned company with their home port is actually Miami. The statement from Carnival Australia is, in addition to willingly participating in the investigation, Carnival Australia will vigorously respond to any allegations of which there must now be full disclosure and the basis for them, a spokesperson said. So, yes, you've got the 900 Ruby Princess passengers who flew under the radar, who aren't included in the official statistics as well, I might point out. They're pretty pissed off, understandably. So the questionnaire we've covered. Let me just get the next article up, and then I want to chat a little bit about the police investigation and the latest on that. So, the ABC is saying, this was updated 2 hours ago, that more than 5,500 passengers are going to be questioned. Now, this one is the article I was talking about before that has the dates of the two voyages. So the first voyage sailed between February the 24th to March the 8th. And then the second one, the bad one, that left Sydney on March the 8th and returned on March the 19th. So there you go. In terms of turnaround, it arrived and left on the same day, March the 8th. I'm just scrolling down because they're talking about the questionnaire, which we've already discussed. And Assistant Commissioner Stuart Smith said, the questionnaire will allow us to zero in on elements of the cruise we're interested in. That goes hand in hand with the forensic examination of the telemetry box, which is like a black box on the ship, and the ship-to-shore communications that occurred. The crew have also been sent a similar survey, and again, it's referring to 1,000 crew members, but the figures jump between 1,000 and 1,100, depending on what news source you're looking at. Superintendent Smith refused to confirm whether the coronavirus outbreak originated on the first cruise and spread to passengers on the second cruise. We're not going to speculate on either of those cruises, he said. We need to create a clear baseline in terms of the operation of the ship so that we can see if there are any particular issues we need to look at from the point of the second cruise. And then again, they're talking about people that have tested positive in New Zealand, Canada, the US and the UK. So that's that one. I'm going to save that article and move it up the end here so I don't close out of it because I want to scribble down those dates. Of course, too, we did discuss this in an earlier episode that patient zero, they believe, on the Ruby Princess would have been somebody working in the kitchen who was also taking food out either to the passengers at tables or out to the 24-hour buffet. They do believe that is what they call patient zero, and they think that it makes sense that it would have been a crew member distributing food to hundreds of passengers on the ship. It's not a proven fact yet, but it is being postulated as the most likely scenario. Cherie, I heard the doctor on board had liaised and said there was sickness. Very strange. I hope they get to the bottom of it. Not that it'll help those that have passed. No, it won't. And I mean, that's a fact, I guess, that we have to accept is that we can't rewind the clock. But in terms of what comes out of this investigation, it's just such a full-on story. Like I've already filled a notebook with notes just from when I started really showing interest in the story. And this is only like the 4th episode I've done of it. It's just, I've really got to sit down and do a chronology, and I'll do like a little video that I can put on my channel that will just go through all the significant dates and information. Obviously, dates are changing every day. I mean, when I first went live about this, there'd been 16 deaths. We're now up to 20. There certainly wasn't the information that's coming out now about how many people are testing positive around the world. And it's like every day there's so many stories. Speaking of, let's talk about the police investigation. So there's a criminal police investigation with 30 detectives, including detectives from the homicide squad, that are looking into it. There was an article that said even at the end of this investigation, which they originally thought would take 2 months, they're now saying it's going to take about 4 months. There was an article that said the outcome of the police investigation may never be made public, and I'm still trying to find out what the actual, I guess, discretion is that allows them to keep it from the public, or whether this would fall under another sort of requirement that it needs to be made public because it's in the public interest. I don't know. But we'll talk about the police investigation for the moment. So they've got these 30 detectives involved, and the headline of this article is "The Ruby Princess probe will be a police investigation like no other." So this article is saying that there will be more than 7,000 people contacted for evidence. So maybe the survey is going out to 5,500. Maybe, I don't know. This isn't the survey, though. This is the police investigation itself, how many people they've got to contact. So it'll be all the passengers on the 2 different voyages, and I'm assuming all the crew members. And then there'll also be all the people that they're actually in the port in Sydney. And, yeah, it's a big one. They have got these 30 investigators who are working to determine whether there was criminal negligence in the handling of the health issues. I'm going to call it now. I think there was, just saying. There's no rule book when it comes to this kind of inquiry, Mr. Elliott said. So Mr. Elliott is the New South Wales Police Minister, David Elliott, the guy that said it was a monumental stuff-up. Love his quote. And they are going to be working with the New South Wales Police Assistant Commissioner, Stuart Smith. And because it does say in this article, earlier it was announced the Ruby Princess may not leave New South Wales on Sunday as planned. All crew members who are yet to show symptoms for COVID-19 will be tested by New South Wales Health while the vessel is still docked at Port Kembla. So they've gone from saying testing all of the crew wasn't going to happen because it would be counterproductive, even though 2 days ago there were 168 confirmed cases on board. They are now going to test every single crew member. I also I think on episode 1 or 2 talked about how a 24-year-old had been taken to Wollongong Hospital from the ship. Apparently 24 people have now been taken from the ship to numerous hospitals and healthcare centres on mainland Australia. State officials had planned for the cruise ship to leave for Manila on Sunday, but New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller told Today if the daily health checks showed crew members' lives were at risk, it would stay docked in New South Wales. Commissioner Fuller said sick crew members could still leave the Ruby Princess depending on their condition. If someone was sick and required medical assistance that can't be provided on the ship, we would take them off, and we have done that continually, he said. But people can have the virus, as we know, and certainly not be critically ill or even seriously ill. So it doesn't just come down to whether someone has the virus or not. It comes down to what their condition is, and can the ship manage it, or is it a danger? If that's the case, we'll take them off before the ship sails. Now, none of the crew members on the Ruby Princess are Australians, just by way of information, and they're all scared. They obviously all want to go home. Can you imagine being young and, most of the kids that work on these cruise ships are young? It would be terrifying. Commissioner Fuller said the ship could make a return to Australian ports if a health emergency started after its departure. I don't know. I think it's probably smart to keep it close to Australia in case there's a health emergency and they can get people off the ship and quickly to a hospital, right? He does go on to say the ships will generally stay fairly close to Australia and our borders, and they could port at any time, obviously. But I guess the key thing is that we work with New South Wales Health to make sure when the ship leaves that the crew members are safe. The ship's been restocked with medical supplies and its doctors are highly trained. There are also authorities working with US, UK and Canadian consulates to determine if some of their citizens among the crew could be flown home from Sydney Airport. So that's that article, which is pretty interesting. There was mention in there of New South Wales Health, and I was going to wrap up when I get to the end of this episode to show you the wording on the New South Wales Health website, which to me is downplaying it like there's no tomorrow. And I'm not doing this series to scare the bejeebus out of anyone. I'm just providing information in articles and research that I'm finding. But it's the first time I actually checked out the New South Wales Health website. And, yeah, I've got to say it's pretty blasé. But we'll get to that in a minute. Jumping back to chat. How's everyone doing? Save Robbie, hello and welcome. How you doing, Groover? And Serenity B, I watched a news program and one of the daughters said, my mother is not a number. She was my mother, grandmother, wife. Exactly. So we will be honouring the names. Hey, Save Robbie, this is my series on the Ruby Princess, which is a cruise ship that is responsible for more deaths in Australia of COVID-19 than anything else. The current death toll in Australia is 65 and there have been 19 Australians have died from this one cruise ship. There's 5 other cruise ships that have contributed to deaths too. If you add up all the deaths from cruise ships in Australia from COVID-19, it's getting close to 50%. It's insane. Well, maybe not 50%, more like 40% probably. It's crazy, including one American citizen who sadly died, Stephen Lazarus, aged 76 from California. So 19 Australians, 1 American just from this one cruise ship. But on top of that, 2,700 passengers were disembarked in Sydney and there were 13 COVID-19 positive passengers and crew already on the ship before they disembarked, even though there's an email allegedly from Princess Cruises saying there was no coronavirus on board. But I haven't been able to verify that email. Hot diggity dog, if that email's legit, that captain's got some explaining to do. So I'm following this with interest, Robbie, because it's just going to become the most, well, it is already, like in Australia, anyone talking about this virus, it's impossible for the conversation to not include, hey, what about those fucking cruise ships? Yeah, it's a big story. And there's a criminal investigation with 30 detectives, including homicide detectives, looking into it. There's also a special commission of inquiry, which has been led by a very senior lawyer in Australia. And, yeah, 900 international passengers that all got off the ship and flew away to their home countries. And they're pissed off. They're pissed off about it. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess, and I can't get enough of it. And when I say that in terms of, I'm not saying I'm loving the gory side of it because I'm not at all, but it's just there's 30 articles a day on it. It's just full on. So we've got all the crew members are now being tested, even though only a day or two ago when I went live, their position was it would be counterproductive to test everyone. Now they are doing that. We've had 6 cruise ships in Australia with passengers that have died. And like I said, unfortunately, the Ruby Princess is the worst, which is why I've called this series The Wreck Of. There's finger pointing going on in every direction too, Robbie, if you're still around. We've got the New South Wales government, which is where Sydney is, where the ship disembarked. They're blaming the opposition in the New South Wales government are blaming the federal government. The New South Wales Premier is being repeatedly sort of accused of all manner of things, and she even admits that the whole thing was mishandled. That's Glarus Berejiklian. I've got to learn how to say her name properly. There's the Princess Cruises themselves and the captain. There's Border Force. There's a State Port Authority. So in one article I read, the Department of Agriculture's been questioned. Like, it's just, and they're all just going, not my fault. Most of them are admitting it was a huge fuck up, but then they're like, but it's not my fault. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. I will now go to the last couple of things I was going to cover. I think we'll leave this for another time. I think I want to do an actual episode on this, which is, who's going to go on one of these floating dungeons, essentially, when, if and when this all ends. I'm curious to know if anyone would ever go on a cruise. I mean, I never wanted to go on a cruise before coronavirus, before COVID-19. I've always just thought they were like floating infection incubators, and I've heard of horror stories of people being stuck on cruise ships with gastro outbreaks, and nope, not my idea of a nice holiday. But I think we could maybe do a live one day and get people up on my panel. Anyone is welcome to jump up on panel 2 tonight if you want to comment on anything that you've read or why you're interested in this fucking schmozzle. You're in bed after work, and you're all better now, aren't you, Robbie? It is crazy. See, Robbie's never wanted to go on a cruise. It's never appealed to me ever. Even when I watched The Love Boat as a kid, a show that I loved, I still didn't want to go on a cruise. I still thought the whole concept of being stuck on this massive ship. There's a little cruise ship that comes into Hobart every year or so that's teeny tiny. It's got like 800 passengers. Well, it's got 800 people on board, like crew and passengers. It looks like a little miniature version of the QE2, and it's navy blue hull and a little white top on it. And I'd probably go on a ship of that size if it was going somewhere super cool like Antarctica or Alaska or something like that. But that would be the absolute biggest ship. And, it only has 800 people total. My sister went on a ship, not a cruise, last year, an expedition from New Zealand to Macquarie Island, stopping at a heap of islands on the way. And I think there were 150 total on that, crew and passengers. That's my kind of a boat to go on. But the big 3,500 passenger floating mini cities, no, fuck that noise. You wouldn't see me. You couldn't pay me enough to go on them. And I love the ocean. I just think cruise ships are my idea of hell. The onboard entertainment doesn't interest me. The 24-hour buffet, the cabin, no, none of it. None of it. Cherie, I've been on several and never been sick, just lucky. Yeah, but Cherie, also, knowing you, I also think you probably went on some fairly decent ones. I don't think you were on, like, P&O booze ships. I think you would have been on a fairly cool one, just saying. I mean, if this wasn't as serious as it is, I'd love to play. There's a parody of The Love Boat done by Saturday Night Live, The Bug Boat, which is quite entertaining. And I do often try to end any lives I do, if they're true crime related or mass negligence related, to do something fun at the end. But feel free to YouTube that one. It's quite funny. All right, we're nearly at the end of it. I do want to show you the New South Wales Health website, just to show you how different their information is, that I think, compared to all these other sources. And I'm finding articles on all kinds of news sites. One of the reasons too, this is another article, why cruise ships refuse to leave Australian shores amid coronavirus outbreak. It's the Australian cruise ship standoff that could become an international crisis. There's currently 8 cruise ships off New South Wales refusing to leave. 8,500 crew members, no passengers are left, no Australians on board, and they're refusing to leave. And I mean, I can kind of see their point. Like, if they did have one of these massive outbreaks and emergencies and stuff, and they're a long way away from land, you can kind of understand they'd want to stay close for help. And the ship's sort of maintaining it's their duty of care to their passengers. That's why they're hanging around. And the other thing is, obviously because of the Ruby Princess, Australia doesn't really want anyone disembarking after what happened when they let people off that. So that's just New South Wales. I mean, the Pacific Explorer, the ships are the Ruby Princess, the Pacific Explorer, Carnival Splendor, the Ovation of the Seas. Well, someone from the Ovation of the Seas died, an Australian passenger. Spectrum of the Seas, Radiance of the Seas, Celebrity Solstice. That's another one that had a victim, or maybe more. I don't have the numbers for each of the. What did I just say? Celebrity Solstice. The ones that have, So the Ruby Princess, Ovation of the Seas, Diamond Princess, Celebrity Solstice, Artania, and Voyager of the Seas, they've all had COVID-19 deaths, at least one from each ship. And the ones off the New South Wales coast now, the Ruby Princess, the Pacific Explorer, Carnival Splendor, the Ovation of the Seas, Spectrum of the Seas, Radiance of the Seas, Celebrity Solstice, and Voyager of the Seas. But the Pacific Explorer was ordered out of Sydney Harbour today, and now it's sort of hovering down off the coast. And this is an Australian homegrown cruise liner that's been ordered to piss off. So, the Pacific Explorer, which is Australian-owned, has had, or homegrown cruise liner, whatever the hell that means, no illnesses on board, and it's been told to go away. The Western Australian Premier was saying to cruise ships a couple of weeks ago, piss off, don't want you, off you go, on your bike. The great cruise ship standoff currently underway. I'm pretty sure I'll do a special episode on what a special commission of inquiry is. It's getting late. I don't want to go into the definitions in the Special Commissions of Inquiry Act 1983. It's a bit dry, but it does feature this brilliant definition. Special commission means a special commission of inquiry established under this act. And then you click on special commission and it doesn't take you anywhere in the act. So I've got a lot of reading on that. Pretty sure I've covered everything, except I do want to show you. I'm going to put it on screen share because this is ridiculous. I'll just check chat first. Jen B, g'day. Your best friend's supposed to be getting married on a cruise in June. Whereabouts is your friend, Jen B? I wonder if Walker would have been appointed if he hadn't won the Pelcats. Interesting question, Joanna. I agree. I mean, he's high profile. It's interesting because, I mean, he's heading this special commission, so it's not like I kind of, in a way, I kind of would have liked him to have been defending the captain of the ship or something, because he's basically heading the commission of inquiry. So I think he would have been an interesting player if he'd defended one of the many parties to this debacle. Because I think they've all got a finger in the pie, and I think they've all done something stupid because they're all passing the bucket, like Cherie said before. And there's a lot of, it's a fuck up, but it wasn't us going on. And the police investigation will be interesting too, and I still think there's a lot of politics is going to come into play, unfortunately. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. But I want to show you on the Caribbean. That would have been delightful. I agree, Joe. Like the timing was just of him being appointed. But don't you reckon he would have been more interesting as the defence barrister for, I don't know, the captain of the ship or the New South Wales government or Border Force? I think Border Force is actually the one that's probably the least sort of suspicious in this whole saga from my reading so far, because they don't really have any powers. There wasn't really much they could have done. But I need to read up more on that too. I mean, this is why I'm finding this fascinating, because I've got to research. I love research. And I love going down little rabbit holes and seeing where it's. I think that's why I studied law, because I knew I would be in a library just going from volume to volume to follow things to find a case that backed up my client. And but there's so much I've got to research. But I think out of all of the ones that have made statements that I've seen, Border Force was the one. I think it was an article I read in the Australian where they really, out of everyone, have really very few powers compared to all of these other roosters. It's interesting. You've got the federal Health Minister Greg Hunt blaming the New South Wales Premier. You've got the New South Wales opposition blaming Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister. There's the State Port Authority, there's the captain, there's the cruise liner. I don't know what the deal is with the Department of Agriculture. I'll find out why they're getting thrown under the bus as well. Who is to blame? Would have been good to defend the captain or the waiter. They need it. They sure do. Yeah, Jen B, I'm a lawyer. You probably can't tell from the way I'm handling this because I'm swearing like a trooper and all kinds of shit. So we're nearly at the 1 hour mark, but I do want to just show you the New South Wales Health website, because I just had a little thought earlier today. I was like, I want to see if there's any kind of state government statement about this. And I stumbled across the New South Wales Health website, and just on the information I've given so far in 4 tiny little episodes, I have been following this for a couple of weeks now, and I was umming and ahhing about whether or not to do a series on it, and then I was just like, fuck it, let's do this. Every article I've read, even though there's a bit of a discrepancy in figures and reporting, and, we didn't get to see all 12 questions on the questionnaire, and some people are saying 7,000 people are getting the questionnaire. Others are saying 5,500. Some articles say 600 people disembarked that were COVID positive or coronavirus positive, COVID-19 positive. Others are saying it was 700. But all of that, all the information that's coming out, it's pretty full on and interesting, and all sorts of questions are being raised. But I really want to show you this New South Wales Health website, and I'm going to expand it as much as I can and see what you guys think. Cherie, maybe he's representing the most guilty as he's done before. Someone had to say it, and yep. But that's the thing, he's not. He's heading this special commission of inquiry. So I will look into that a bit more, because I did see one article that said that Brett Walker is going to have by being the head of the Special Commission of Inquiry, he does actually have quite a few powers bestowed on him. So, yeah, I don't know what, but I did have some little scribbly notes. I am going to sit down tomorrow and sort out my notes, because I'm so thirsty for this. I'm just like writing, and the problem is I've just got pages of notes, and I really need to just bullet point the crap out of my notes. But yeah, I would have liked him to have been representing a party in it personally, but because he's clearly very good at getting guilty people off. I wonder if this channel will get struck. It's nice to actually do this and just have a proper conversation, like we're sitting around a dining room table talking about it. I don't want to be this is Tori Hodgman with all the facts. I just want to chat about it and make notes and see what people think about it. I mean, I've got very cynical friends that are saying, the whole thing's going to be conducted and run by the LNP, and no one's going to actually get the NLP, and no one's going to get, any truth out of it. And so there's all the sort of political theories that are happening, and I mean, there's clearly a lot of shit that's going down that's not being disclosed, but I'll show you this website. I'm keen to see what you guys all think when we get to the end of it. So just give me a sec. So here we are. And I'd love anyone to jump up on panel with me at the end for a quick chat too. I don't mind if this goes for a little bit longer than an hour because we've covered so much tonight. So I'm going to expand it a bit, but basically it's the New South Wales Government Health Department website. And this is a very outdated update. They haven't updated it since the 3rd of April, 2 weeks ago. So sort of pull your finger out. So some of the figures are going to be a little bit outdated, to say the least. But what I'm fascinated about, are you guys able to read that? It should be pretty clear. Maybe Tom Hanks can play Walker in the movie. Yeah, I reckon he should. So I'll try and expand it a tiny bit more just to get it right. There we go. You should be able to read that fairly clearly, everyone. Just give me a sec. I've just got to blow my nose because I always get an itchy friggin' nose when I go live, and it's something I'm using in my kitchen. It does my head in. I've even changed my washing detergent and it's still happening. So I apologise for that. So let's have a look. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on the figures because we already know the figures are 2 weeks old. But there were just some things that jumped out at me when I was scanning this earlier. For starters, it's very vague in terms of the wording. So have a look at the first sentence. Don't worry about the cases. We know that's not accurate now. But the second part of the sentence, in passengers who all acquired their infection while on, or in some cases, possibly before boarding the Ruby Princess cruise. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, it is possible that someone did board the Ruby Princess cruise who was COVID positive. I mean, it had to get on the ship somehow. But just the vagueness of it. Transmission of COVID-19 amongst these passengers could not have been prevented by New South Wales health staff. No cases of COVID-19 were identified on board the ship before it docked. But I've got an article that says there were 13 positive results, and I will try to find that source. I'm pretty sure it was in an article in the Australian, but I want to find where that actual figure came from. But that figure is floating around. It's not something that was only reported once. Like, I've seen it popping up all over the place. The vast majority of these passengers reported they did not develop symptoms until after leaving the Ruby Princess. Well, duh. Everyone knows it sort of incubates, and I think the most consistent day that people start to really get sick is day 8. Some people, are getting a bit unwell, and it's a shitty virus. It's not like a bad flu. This thing's a prick. So day 4, your symptoms are probably worse than the worst flu that you've ever had. But in terms of getting really sick, it's, I think the average is about day 8 when people really get sick. All passengers were advised to self-isolate for 14 days following disembarkation, which New South Wales, here's the Department of Agriculture, okay, which New South Wales Health has confirmed was provided by the Federal Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment. Let's start pointing the finger even on an official state government website. Now, the issue with this is the passengers that have been interviewed on TV shows, the non-reputable ones like A Current Affair through to serious news channels, so they were given a piece of paper that vaguely told them what they had to do. But the reality is they weren't in positions to self-isolate. It didn't say they couldn't fly to their respective home states or countries, and that's why they all took off. And that's why all these international passengers are furious, and they feel bad that they were on planes, in airports, catching up with people, engaging in areas with lots of other people. So yeah, there's definitely feedback from the passengers, and whatever they were handed when they got off the ship was pretty vague. But yep, there's New South Wales Health pointing out that it was the Federal Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment. The 3rd of April sentence is next one we can't really talk about because it's out of date anyway. They then remind us all that COVID-19 can rapidly spread among passengers if left on board, so self-isolation at home is a much safer option than leaving passengers on board. You reckon? New South Wales Health had prepared plans in the event COVID-19 being identified on a cruise ship. Well, that'd be cool. Wouldn't mind seeing the plans, because it doesn't sound like the plan they had worked very well. On this particular voyage, it was known that influenza activity had been identified on the ship. Is that wording a broad way of getting around saying that they knew that there was coronavirus activity identified on the ship? I don't know. The Ruby Princess was assessed as low risk based on the level of illness on board. I think at the moment, I think even back on March the 19th, COVID-19 had already been declared a global pandemic. The Australian federal government was already saying cruise ships come home. I mean, this cruise ship came back to port 2 days early. Let's not forget that. So the ship kind of knew they needed to get back there a little bit earlier than planned. Anywho, but I can keep going if you want. I'll have a look and see how you're reacting in chat if you're finding this interesting. Yeah, the self-isolation notices. How odd. Surely that would be, you'd think so. You'd think so, Joanna. You would think so. But they're very quick to point out that, no, it wasn't them. I don't know. To me, just reading this, after all the other stuff I've read and all the interviews I've listened to and all the shows I've watched about it, this website's pretty shonky, and it's 2 weeks out of date as well. Wouldn't you think if you were in the international spotlight right now, as New South Wales Health are, that you'd kind of be on top of things and putting regular updates and, don't you think that at the moment they would be trying to be seen to be a really efficient, on top of it kind of department? So yeah, it was assessed as low risk based on the level of illness on board. The negative COVID-19 tests done on passengers while in New Zealand. So there's another crucial thing we need to look into, is what date did they actually depart New Zealand? Because, they're saying that the cluster of COVID-19 in Napier is from passengers disembarking from this ship. So someone's not telling the truth. And the positive influenza tests done on a large proportion of the passengers with influenza-like illness. Is that a sneaky way of getting around saying coronavirus? I don't know. But it was assessed as low risk, even though New Zealand's now saying that the cluster of cases in Napier had something to do with the Ruby Princess. The risk assessment process recognised that there is no risk setting for COVID-19, but balanced the level of risk against the benefit of removing passengers from a cruise ship on which the virus could be circulating. I think their risk assessment process was a bit flawed. I must admit, this has been developing organically and unravelling organically, and maybe back then things weren't quite as, we know that things weren't quite as sort of firm or not even set in concrete. They can't set any of this in concrete, but, I'm happy to give them a little bit of leeway. That the knowledge back then may not have been as advanced as it is now. But, yeah, I just find this whole thing very bizarre. So they're now talking about the influenza tests and so on. This is reflected in email correspondence between New South Wales Health and the ship's doctor on the Ruby Princess, who confirmed influenza was circulating on the cruise. However, in 2 sick patients referenced in the email, although they'd tested negative to influenza, the cause of their respiratory infection was consistent with influenza for which they were receiving treatment. I wouldn't mind seeing that email. The reasons for ambulance transport requested by the treating doctor to New South Wales Health's assessment panel were: one passenger had a heart condition likely caused by an infection, which was responding to influenza treatment, and the second passenger was suffering severe lower back pain but was also receiving treatment for flu. Isn't lower back pain often cited as one of the early symptoms of COVID-19? And, a lot of people reported how they saw passengers being taken off the ship and put into ambulances. So that's what that's all about. Under the Commonwealth Department of Health cruise protocols, an ILI outbreak is defined when more than 1% of the ship's total passengers and crew have an influenza-like illness. The Ruby Princess, here we go. Well, here's the accurate figure for the crew. The Ruby Princess had 2,647 passengers and 1,148 crew. The ship reported to New South Wales Health there were 104 acute respiratory infections, of which 36 people had presented to the ship's clinic with influenza-like illness during the cruise, and its numbers fell short of the definition of an outbreak. The Commonwealth Department of Health protocol on managing novel coronavirus disease, COVID-19 risk from cruise ship, states, provided there are no concerns about the COVID-19 risk profile of the ship or suspected COVID-19 cases reported, the ship may be allowed to continue voyage while samples are tested. Keen to see what you guys think about that before I wrap this little gathering up. Joanna, that's a shocking. If anyone wants to pop up, I'll pop the link. I don't mind having a little chat for 5 or 10 minutes before we sign off. If anyone wants to, if you haven't used StreamYards before, it doesn't take very long for you to be connected, and you can jump up on panel if you feel like having a little chat. It's only a small gathering. This is a fairly quiet time of the night to go live on the YouTubes, but that is a shockingly blatant attempt at ass covering. It looks like that's what it was set up for. It looks like something Trump would write. I know, it's so bloody dodgy. I mean, what is it? It was only like in the first 5 sentences that they say, we couldn't have done anything about this. But while we're at it, let's start. Yeah, the second sentence. Transmission of COVID-19 amongst these passengers could not have been presented by New South Wales health staff. No cases of COVID-19 were identified on board the ship before it docked. Well, I'm going to go back and find that article that said there were 13 positive results before that bloody ship docked. But yeah, they're very quick to then start blaming everyone else. Federal Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment get a kick up the bum. They blame they admit the doctor said that, there were a few issues on board. The Commonwealth Department of Health cruise protocols are blamed. The Commonwealth Department of Health protocols criticised, or not criticised, but made out to sound like their protocols were shite. It's just crazy. You would think it'd be more dynamic and efficient. Cherie's battery's about to die. Rest in peace, battery. Good to have had you here, though. They should be trying to look professional. Infection control is well documented regardless of the virus. Bacteria, so I'd love to. So, yeah, your battery is dying. That's cool. I mean, it's not cool, but bugger. But thank you for hanging out with us, Cherie. Good to see you in here. Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to. I probably need to chat to a doctor, and if possible, I need to find someone who's been a doctor on a cruise ship who can shed some light on that side of it as well. This is why these investigations are just mind-blowing. They're going to be massive. All the people they're going to be speaking to and all the stuff that's going to come out. It's the bug boat, I tell you. I'm almost tempted to play the bug boat to end this episode, but I don't want to do it and then be accused of, taking the piss. I think it's important we still laugh through even while we follow this thing. But yeah, that New South Wales health website stuck out like dog's balls to just being so, well, it's not clear. It's 2 weeks old, the most recent thing on there. I might just do one last check to see, because there seems to be a Ruby Princess story sort of happening every 5 seconds. See if there's any new news stories. That page is loading and it's going to start playing a video. Just let me nip that in the bud before it starts.
Now the debate.
Oh, it's that stupid Tracy Grimshaw. All right, let me have a look. I like having a look at the latest headlines before I sign off. Not just Ruby Princess ones, but Virgin's brought in social distancing on flights. Did you guys see the photo of that Virgin flight with them all sitting like a packed plane, no social distancing from like yesterday? Good on them for bringing in social distance. I wouldn't be getting on a plane at the moment either. Okay, so the death toll in China has suddenly jumped by thousands. Okay, that's interesting. Let me go to my favourite Johns Hopkins University coronavirus statistics website and see what the deal is. We've all speculated that the stats coming out of China have been downplayed significantly. So they've either had another outbreak or they're actually posting accurate figures, one or the other. Okay. Yeah, let's see what's going on here, what they're saying about China. So in the last 24 hours, 351 new cases, 1,290 new deaths in the last 24 hours. Interesting. Total cases is still 82,000. I mean, they're behind USA, Spain, Italy, France, Germany, UK, and China. They are China. They're behind the USA, Spain, Italy, France, and Germany, and the UK. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I want to see what that article says. COVID-19 epicenter revises death toll, blames overwhelmed medical facilities on initial misinformation.
Around the world, more than...
Okay, so there's an additional 1,290 deaths for Wuhan. Chinese state media said the undercount had been due to the insufficient admission capabilities at overwhelmed medical facilities at the peak of the outbreak. I don't know, guys. I still think those figures for China are a little bit low. Just quietly. Yeah. All right, so that's a headline that's just broken. Peter Dutton says Australia deserves answers from China. I think the whole planet deserves answers from China. Australia's death toll still 65 with 6,498 cases. Another rumour that COVID-19 originated in a Chinese lab. I don't know. I remember a specialist saying weeks ago they found animal DNA in it, so I don't know why those, the 5G and all the rest of it. Anything else of note? I always try to find one happy story at the end of my lives as well. So let's see if we can find one. There's usually one. Lots of people getting fined in New South Wales because they're still going to the beach. There's the questionnaire from the Ruby Princess. SA's got one new case. Oh, a police officer fined for breaching social distancing rules. He was involved in a single vehicle crash on Good Friday. Bad Friday for him. There's some testing measures rolling out in the Northern Territory. Don't panic, Australians. We've got shitloads of food. Unfortunately, another COVID-19 death in Western Australia, but that would be the crew member of that cruise ship we talked about earlier, the Artania. Come on, where's a good news story? There's another story about Wuhan saying almost 4,000 died in Wuhan, but what's the total deaths for China? Recorded here at the moment, total deaths 4,632. And that article's saying 3,869. Numbers of total cases in the city of 11 million were also raised to 50,333. Not finding any. All right, let's see. The surprising appliances being bought by Australians in lockdown: fridges, freezers, heaters, and pie makers. Pie makers. Donald Trump's lawyer and longtime fixer Michael Cohen will be released from prison early due to the risk of coronavirus. Sweden's starting to get in a bit of shite because they didn't do any kind of self-isolating stuff. Oh, there's a sing-along in New York. Bless. Maybe we could end with that. But there you go. Biscuits over here telling me she wants me to get off YouTube. I'll just check chat, see if there's any other comments, and we might wrap this little thing up. The light thing in Tassie from tomorrow night. Everyone should shine a light for health workers at 8 p.m. each night. Duncan would like you to know he panic bought the hi-fi system. Someone's this little, come here, Morgs. Hang on. If Biscuit, when I'm studying, I'm doing a whopping great assignment. Don't bite me. You're being filmed. People on YouTube just saw you bite me, Biscuit. If I'm studying or sitting in a chair or doing anything for too long, she comes along and puts her paws up onto my leg and inserts her claws. Not in a vicious way, but it's like I want your attention now. Thank you. Say hi to YouTube world, Biscuit. I'm about to wrap up. Can you just give me a few minutes? She's getting so spoiled. Like, I'm her 24/7 entertainment, and she likes watching TV with me before we go to bed. Is it time for some TV? We like watching the French series of The Circle on Netflix, don't we? And we're getting close to the end of it. I'll be with you in a sec. I promise. So I'll wrap this up. The light thing, that'd be a very cool thing to do as well. Cherie bought a hip. I didn't panic buy anything. In hindsight, I wish I'd panic bought some chocolate. Anywho, Biscuit and I are going to go and watch the French version of The Circle. which is ironically a reality show. So far, we've seen the American one and the Brazilian one, and now we're watching the French one, and it's basically 8 people or variations of that. There's twins and a mother and son and whatever, but essentially it's 8 people self-isolating. It's quite weird that this show has been filmed and it's basically people doing jigsaw puzzles and baking a lot. So that's what we're about to go and watch. And thanks for joining me. Just as I'd like to do at the end of my series on the wreck of the Ruby Princess, just to acknowledge the named victims so far, because we don't want them to ever be statistics. Janet Lieben, 67, of New South Wales. Carla Lake, 75, of Caboolture, Queensland. Des Williams, 85, from Toowoomba in Queensland. And Stephen Lazarus, 76, of California. They are 4 of the 20 victims who sadly died of COVID-19 and coronavirus complications after being on the wreck of the Ruby Princess. Take care, everyone. I'm going to go live on Sunday night or Sunday day, I don't know yet, with some pretty outlandish Australian folk joining me. If you want to come and hang out for that, that'll be on my Right Now with Tori channel. I will continue to do Ruby Princess updates, and I'll do little short podcasts that come across to YouTube, but also do some lives when there's things to talk about. And I'm also going to be organising a couple of Zoom nights soon as well. So thanks for joining me, gorgeous girls. We could have just gone live on Zoom. Well, one thing that's really cool about StreamYards is when you end the broadcast, you're all kind of backstage and you can just have a little after party. So keep that in mind. You're too drunk. That would have been entertaining, gorgeous. But yeah, we'll keep following this story as it unravels. It's certainly a fascinating one. Gone way over the time because I'm hoping people will start following this series, and an hour and a half might put them off, but who knows? If you have watched this in replay and made it to the end, thank you so much. I don't know why you've managed to hang out for an hour and a half, but good on you. Don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. It helps me with my algorithms with YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, and welcome to my new subscriber as well. But if you haven't, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also the solid bell, and you'll get notifications whenever I go live on either the Right Now with Tori channel or the Smooth Criminal Podcast channel. Take care out there. Thanks for hanging out with me on a Friday night. And some of your comments have been absolute gold. You've been the best audience I've had all day. I love you guys. Stay safe and don't touch your face. See you soon. Take care out there.